hear?
I can hear you perfectly. I am so looking forward to this. I know there's a lot that we got to talk around some certain topics, but I'm very happy to do that with you because it's going to be a hell of a lot of fun. My friends, I can't wait to get into this. I've done so much research in the background. I've spent so much trying to figure out, your history and everything. But I thought I'd try and take this in a very, very laid-back style of format with you. One, let's just start with the government and your time being seconded into the government, so to speak. What was that like? Because I think that if we look at the US right now and what's happening with David Sachs on Twitter, and how a lot of the tech CEOs are rallying around him and saying, like, look, we appreciate what Sachs has done for the ecosystem. The hit piece that went out wasn't great, blah, 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 blah. What I look at that and I see is we have individuals from specific backgrounds that have been successful in what they've done, working for the good of the country. It feels like what you did was the same. Tell me more.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether I want to equivocate with at that scale of impact, perhaps with someone like Sachs, but I think there's a wider point here where and first I should say that thanks so much for having me on. Like, really stoked to be here as well. I love the sort of like original pirate material style background that you've got. So as a fellow Streets fan, but by the by, yeah, I think we're sort of seeing it at the moment right now where I think, whether you're in the public, whether you're somebody that works in the tech space, I think there's a lot of people that are dissatisfied with the way in which states are functioning. People really feel like the state is not delivering for them at every iota you could possibly think of. And this is a problem. This is a real challenge. But what I think it sort of means is there's a lot of really fantastic people that are coming out of the woodwork and thinking, if I don't try and help fix the problem, then who's gonna? Because there's not some like cavalry. There's this sort of saying, Dominic Cummings talks about this in his blogs, where he basically says, you think when you go into government that you'll open the door in number 10 and there's a room full of ninjas sort of fixing all of these problems. But there's no secret door. There are no ninjas. And so we need more ninjas. And so I think you've started to see more and more people decide, I want to have a crack at trying to help fix things. You saw it with people like Matt Clifford coming in. You've seen it with Ian Hogarth as well, chair of the AI Security Institute, Jade Lung. Lots of these people with incredible backgrounds that could be doing whatever they want to do. But they're committing themselves to public service, and I think this is something that should be sort of, it's probably massively underrated. I think some of the sacrifices that these people are making in that process.
I deeply agree, and we were talking to Joe Reeves on the show last week about public sentiment around government and around the state itself. And one of the things that he talked about here was how millennials are probably the poorest generation, and Gen Z is not taking that crap anymore. And they're saying, like, look, we want to actively go out into our society and do good. And I think that's amazing that you took on the mantle and chose to, like, did you choose or were you requested to? I just want to make sure that we're getting the definition right.
Yeah. The Prime Minister did not call me
just like, hey, Tom, look, I need a favor.
Yeah. I mean, that was something else. No, I mean, the way it came about, I don't know if I've told this story before, but on the day of the general election, so that was last year, June. It was June or July last year. I can't remember. I think July 4th. I had a coffee with Matt Clifford. And
just casually having coffee with Matt Clifford these days.
Well, now you're making out like I'm flexing now. But we were catching up, and he'd sort of said, if Labour wins, then I've been asked to do this like AI opportunities review, and so there was some kind of like, I know they were looking for people that could potentially come in and help on whatever that might look like, and so obviously I was super keen to do that. I'd spent for the audience, I'd spent the last few years working in the think tank world. So I was at the Tony Blair Institute, working on a lot of our AI policy, our science policy with them. And you spend a lot of time trying to think about, what are the ideas, what are the policies, but you're not doing much on the delivery side. And I think, I was at that time where I wanted to try and get my hands dirty and try and get stuff done. So it was the sort of perfect time with this sort of new wave of optimism about the government, which obviously maybe has perhaps subsided somewhat. but also a lot of excitement about AI and technology, and having someone like Matt, if Matt Clifford sort of picks up the phone and says, I'd love your help on something, you'd be crazy to say no. Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. Yeah, well, I'm sure whatever Matt wants to do, he'll have many people supporting him. But yeah, I think he's been a tremendous help. When I was working in government, he was one of the people. He was like a bit of a Superman that you might have a challenge, and you'd want to try and like pull him to kind of help unblock whatever problem it is.
Agreed.
The problem with that is that he's not just someone. My team's sort of get out of jail free card. He's a lot of other teams, and so you have this problem, particularly when you have quite a hierarchical system within the British state, where lots of decision making is very like bottlenecked by senior decision making. You know, People like Matt and others, it's not just Matt, their time is very, very limited. And so, they'll be like brought in to try and resolve a bunch of different problems. And and so, I mean, and again, that was like a challenge working government. How do you kind of all the senior folks are incredibly time poor, and what can you do to try and like sort of short circuit some of those
How do you think about that then? Did you find a solution to that particular very, very hard problem? Because there's a lot of admin that I saw some of these staff have to do. They've got other things on their plate. Certain priorities that we would deem priorities that are actually going to move the needle aren't
yeah.
being moved. Was there a
Yeah.
solution to that? Is that leaning on technology, or is that something else?
It's a good question. It depends on who you're dealing with. So
Right.
I think someone like Matt is, and again, so I don't, I,
Listen,
I,
Matt
I feel
Glenn's
like this is the
obsession.
Matt Clifford, yeah, yeah, exactly. Like, Matt love it. Like, I think my girlfriend is listening to this live, and she probably is like, "Why you talk about that too much at home? Why are you doing it here?" But um, I guess with someone like that who's he's quite a sort of like um, he'll deal with you at face value. He doesn't care about sort of like status and where you are within the hierarchy, and that makes him quite rare and unique compared with perhaps other people within the sort of establishment, who care about what's your PhD on, and how senior are you, and all of these things. Whereas people in the sort of venture startup world, I think, defer to those things a lot less. And so that means that you can, when you're engaging with people like that, you know, getting on a quick WhatsApp or like whatever else, there are like kind of like ways around that. For perhaps people that are, there might be sort of more senior officials that are more sort of like time poor, getting pulled in all these different directions. It's just lots of things like, you know, managing putting blockers in their calendar to say sign off this thing, or a big thing I learned when in government, I would send these quite long emails saying here's the problems, here's what I think needs to be done, and then the civil service, you're completely overwhelmed with email. Like having a managed inbox is basically like an impossible task. And so I quite quickly realized like I need my emails to like the senior directors to be extremely short with a clear action at the top that can get signed off immediately, because they're just kind of like they're not going to read the emails at that sort of length, just no
Feels
matter how
like
good my writing is.
feels like a fixer AI problem.
I cannot comment on open procurement, but I don't know if fixer in country open, but yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think there was probably enough innovation with respect to technology with some of these things. I know that government is now starting to do a bit more. I know we had a thing called like AC Chat, which is named after this kind of AI Security Institute, which was sort of a, our own version of like ChatGPT, which was like very, very good, but also was sort of held data securely. So it wasn't, you could put a sensitive information in on things. But in terms of how you reimagine the way in which a private office works, in terms of the way in which you might reimagine how meetings take place and teams operate, I think there's certainly some way to go there.
I would love to talk to you a little bit about your time at the Tony Blair Institute. TBI has sort of come into cultural zeitgeist a little bit more as they've become more vocal with this particular government. I think the framing of the question here is, and sort of like where I'd like to take this section of the discussion is like, what does it do specifically? There is a whole lot of misinformation out there, and I'd love to understand as someone who's worked there, like, could you please set this, like, the facts straight for me? What does TBI do here, and why is it important that think tanks like this exist?
Yeah, so I think the TBI is very unique, very, very unique place, both to work and just as what it does. The sort of, I'll give the elevator pitch as if I'm still a TBI employee, and then sort of give more kind of context, which is, the TBI, basically their main customer is how do we help political leaders, so that is presidents, prime ministers, people that run government departments, and realize the benefits of the technological revolution through strategy. So like working out, right, what should you be doing, what should you focus on, policy, all right, what's the like mechanism to deliver on that strategy, and then delivery, like actually like doing the thing. And so what the institute ended up doing was it had a sort of think tank arm which helped do a lot of the policy ideation and development. That was where I worked. And there was, and actually the much larger part of the organization is maybe less well known, and because I guess a lot of the coverage of the TBI comes through the British media, so focuses on this like think tank arm. But there's a big kind of consulting arm of the institute, and so that is kind of a bit of a McKinsey style sort of operation, if you like, and that is sort of often placed in different countries around the world where we have, where the TBI, would have clients. So the TBI, I think, works in like something like 40 countries around the world. At this point, it's probably about 1,000-person strong org. And then alongside that, they would sort of do convening on sort of infrastructure product builds. So like a really good example of like one thing that they did was they helped partner with Starlink to deploy Starlink terminals in schools across Rwanda and Malawi. So they're also involved in, like, it's not just the kind of more traditional. This is why I think it's so unique, right? Like, it's not just a think tank, it's not just a consultancy. It's like actually helping to try and enable some of these like, big infrastructure build outs in countries that are trying to, I guess, like leapfrog other nations with respect to building tech infrastructure.
I've always found think tanks like enigmas in that, like, our only real insight into them is not from the people that people talk about them openly, but like sort of what we get from movies and TV series. And so when I first came across TBI, I was sort of sitting there like, what do these guys do? Just sit in a room and talk politics all day? It seems like
there's a bit of that.
I'm sure there is, but I think there's also an element today more than ever around the sovereignty, right? Question around AI sovereignty, energy sovereignty. From your time there, your time in government, I would just love your personal opinions on this around how important is the sovereignty and then what you're building at Fractile.
Yeah. I mean, I'll start. Yeah, maybe I can go on the journey of sovereignty through these different organizations, and that might be a good place to start. So it was sort of interesting being somewhere like TBI, where we'd work with a lot of countries around the world, which would have very different notions of what being sovereign meant. And in many nations, there was a sense of digital and data sovereignty was really, really important. And what that means or meant in practice to them was they were very worried about a kind of big hyperscaler coming in and sort of taking data out of the country with what they might have seen as limited returns. So there's actually quite a lot of countries in the global south that have tried to sort of build their own sort of national data center infrastructure and things like this to try and like move away from the kind of the hyperscaler model. Now obviously there's arguments kind of for and against this as approach. But then you speak with some of the more kind of frontier kind of countries, and it was very much around, how can we have access to the cutting edge capabilities, whether it's of like AI technology, whether it's of, access to critical inputs within the supply chain that help develop key technologies. But at the time when I was at TBI, I think sovereignty was like bubbling away as an issue, but I think it hadn't really emerged, to the fore in the way that perhaps it has in 2025. And so I joined the Sovereign AI unit in DCIT, like I was saying, to work with Matt Clifford and others on helping to sort of try and deliver parts of the AI action plan. But I was in this unit called the Sovereign AI unit. And the purposes of this unit was to try to help to scale national champions in AI in this country. The reason that's important, and the reason I'm increasingly of the view that this is important, is that today we have some sort of a winner takes all market in AI. There's a very small number of companies, a very small number of founders that have these outsized impacts on the trajectory of the markets that they operate in and sort of, the economy and society writ large. And having some of those companies will help sort of define national power in the future. And you're already seeing it in America. You've seen it in other countries that have some of those big players. So like Korea, who have incredible capabilities in like memory. So companies like SK Hynix, Taiwan with TSMC, the Netherlands with ASML. And the problem is with the UK. I mean, we have DeepMind. We've got some amazing companies kind of coming through, which I'm sure one of which we'll talk a little bit more about. But we don't really have any sort of market leading kind of player in this space. And that this potentially is like a big strategic risk to us as a nation, for like multiple reasons that we can get into. So I think and over the course of 2025, we've seen things like we've seen big shifts in our geopolitics. We've seen a big set of technological innovations in sort of like China seeming to catch up on model development to the US, or kind of almost catch up there. And so I think there is this sense that people want to try and have our own sort of national champions. Ian Hogarth actually talked about this back in 2018 with this essay on AI nationalism, which was, really, really prescient, given that, it was almost, sort of seven years ago now. And he was really kind of on the money with the sort of dynamics he was calling out. And so then I guess, joining a company like Fractile, it feels like the kind of final realization of this. Like, Fractile, we're not just aiming to be a sort of a British champion. Like, that isn't ambitious enough for us. But I think that sovereignty is still a really important aspect about how we view ourselves as a company. And we do want to provide both cutting edge capabilities to customers. But also we want to, be able to provide a sense that, people that want to, procure our technology have control. And again, that'll be something that's increasingly important as infrastructure and AI infrastructure becomes more of a sort of part of critical national infrastructure moving forward.
Where are we playing in the AI stack with Fractile? Is it at a chip layer? Is it a foundational model layer? Is it an inference layer? I know it's on an application layer, but like, how would you describe what you're building over there?
So quick elevator pitch on this from my side. So Fractile's building. We build chips. We build software as well, and sort of systems to radically improve the speed and cost of running frontier AI inference. So we're kind of like full stack, fabless company. And the reason that we're trying to get into this space is that existing hardware is really, really good for doing model training, but it's very poorly suited to the subsequent inference that comes like after that training. And there's a real problem at the moment with current GPU and sort of next generation of GPU architecture, which is something known as the memory war. So the kind of idea here is that because there's quite a harsh trade-off between the cost of being able to serve a model and the speed at which you'd serve a model. So like the ideal scenario is you can serve something that's like really fast and really cheap, but current sort of GPU architecture from NVIDIA and others basically forces quite a sort of hard trade-off. And that's because, because of the placement of different parts of the chip, the model weights need to shuttle quite a way back and forth across different hardware. And this basically creates a big challenge for where, a lot of the time the chip is just waiting for like more data to kind of come into it. So it's almost like, think of it like in, I don't know if you've seen the film Limitless, where it feels like we're operating at sort of 10% of our brain, and we need to take some like pill to basically like unlock this like different mode of operating. Like that's the era that we're in at the moment. Now I don't want to compare us to sort of addictive drugs. I sort of hope we're healthier than that.
Well, I hope it's addictive technology for the betterment of the good of society.
Yeah, and I think it's important. We want to, we're not just about having snappier chatbots. We're not just about having, you wait a bit less time whilst you're getting your coffee to create a funny image or whatever.
Right.
And we think that our technology could be the decisive difference between one person's company reaching a scientific breakthrough versus another. When we have in the future much more kind of AI-enabled economies with whole fleets of agents that are being deployed at speed and at scale, the ability of your workforce, of your sort of, of your nation to be able to flex that kind of agent pool, very quickly and very cheaply is going to have like, way beyond GDP level impact, or at least the way in which we understand GDP level impact from the technology at the moment. So that's the kind of market that we're playing into.
It's a very blunt question, but how do you compete with someone like NVIDIA in this?
Mm-hmm.
Because as the incumbent $4 trillion plus company, do you look at it as competition, or do you look at it as like we're playing for something here that is a little longer term than where we're currently at, and we believe the innovations that we've made and will make are going to dramatically change the technology that we're currently using today?
Yeah, I mean, we're in tremendous sort of awe of the sort of foundation that NVIDIA has laid for the entire ecosystem that has been built. I actually just finished reading the NVIDIA Way over the weekend, which is
it's a hell of a way, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly incredible, and also just sort of seeing how I've seen your mentioning of questions around Mount Rushmore founders, and I was sort of like, can I include Jensen on? Can I include Jensen on this? But I'll have to think about that. It depends how the rest of this conversation goes. But what was I going to say? I mean, I think the main thing to say on this is that this is a huge market. NVIDIA is the sort of one big player at the front of the pack here, an almost sort of $5 trillion dollar company, with a market that's only going to grow. Right now, I think we're at the point where there's this like bottomless pit of demand for AI inference. As the reasoning models do increasingly long tasks, which is happening. The sort of length of time in which sort of AI model can reliably do a task is doubling every 6 or so months. So that means that agents by the end of 2030 are going to be able to complete tasks which are about a month long. So this just unlocks like a totally new set of ways about which you could reorganize your workforce, your organizations, and so on. And so like this is the market to get into. With respect to kind of what NVIDIA are sort of doing. I mean, we know about what the NVIDIA have released their plans for their sort of upcoming Rubin architecture and things. So we kind of like know. Yeah, we know what we're up against, and I guess that's why we think that we're producing something a little bit different at this point. But yeah, I think the sort of size and scale of the market means that there's obviously space for multiple players at this point. And so yeah, I think we're kind of really excited about what the next couple of years have in store for us.
It's pretty cool, and like the way that Jensen operates, I haven't read the book, but I've sort of like deep dived through other mediums on Jensen, and the way that he operates the NVIDIA organization is being almost like a conduit of information and then moving pieces around and being able to orchestrate the company is like absolutely insane. I don't think people realize how incredible a founder and leader of a company that he is. And we had Nicholas on, I think just before you, we were talking, or earlier in the day, and we were talking about how the way that I describe why NVIDIA is such a great company and why he's on one of my Rushmores is because he had to go against the entropy of a mother's love.
Mm-hmm.
Like he literally fought, like he kept us playing games, which is the one thing that every parent said, no, don't play games. And the only reason, a part of the reason that we have AI today is because of the GPUs that were powering a lot of these units and computers, which I think is pretty cool. And like, if we think about, like the Dwell Crash episode came out recently with Ilya, right? And Ilya's sitting there going like, we're back in the age of research. And that's awesome. It feels like the memory unlock that you figured out at Fractile is going to just supercharge all of that, especially if you can get these out in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, where we see ourselves as particularly like exciting is in areas such as coding agents and things like this. You know, if we can deliver the sort of speed unlock that we believe we can have at very kind of low latency, then that puts us on a path to kind of automated AI R&D in a much clearer way than we currently have at the moment. And all the things that sit underneath that, like that might sound like that's great if you're in SF or if you're working in a developer kind of ecosystem. But all the things that's unlocked for sort of automated AI scientists and things like this, I think we're, that is the vision that we have. Can we increase the kind of clock speed for these like long-term tasks that can basically mean that you have not only like 10x the number of engineers at your disposal. And, what would you do if you had 10 times the number of engineers at your disposal would be a kind of good question to ask here. But also I think, we hope that there's a kind of new array of tasks that people haven't been able to think of before because the kind of cost and speed constraints that we've been operating under have kind of shackled our creativity and the way in which we think about approaching problems.
I knew an hour or half an hour was going to be enough with you. Like I just knew it was going to play on my mind, and it played on my mind all week. It was like, do I extend this for an hour? But we're going to have to get you back on the show at some point very soon. Before we let you go, you know what's coming.
Yeah.
Four founders, Mount Rushmore, greatest of all time. For Tom, who are they?
So it was funny. I sort of listened earlier on, and I heard you ask this. I didn't realize it was going to be repeatable. And then I just before I got into the green room, I heard it again. I was like, oh, what am I doing? So I wrote a few down. So I'm going to go for some slightly rogue ones. But I'll start with the easy ones. Obviously, I've got to say my boy Walter Goodwin, who's CEO of Fractile. Perhaps now this is his first company, but one of the reasons I joined Fractile was because I thought Walter is the founder that this country has been missing. And that was a really central thing for me. Whatever I did next, I wanted to be, working with someone truly exceptional and trying to work out how I can enable them in whatever way possible. So I generally do believe that, like, whichever company I joined, it was going to be someone where it was a founder that I really believed in.
That's incredible.
But sort of looking at sort of, a bit more widely, I think, has anyone said Demis yet? Like, yes, I feel like Demis.
Yes, Nicholas said Demis.
All right, okay, all right.
He's been mentioned on the show in 219 plus guests 3 times. You are the 3rd.
All right, okay, glad that. Well, I mean, if anyone's not seen The Thinking Game, which is a film about the sort of history of DeepMind and Demis as this truly exceptional founder, is worth watching. At TXP, which is a sort of tech and policy community I helped run, we did a screening of it over the summer, and I think it's just been released on YouTube, and there's already like, I don't know how many views it's at now, but
wild for it over Thanksgiving.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. But I think part of the reason I want to say this is like he's the person that, like, without DeepMind being founded, you don't get OpenAI, you don't get Anthropic as well. Demis has been at the center of this with Shane Legg and others. So I'd have Demis, and then some slightly roguer ones. I'm going to say Lee Kuan Yew. I'm going to go for a statesman founder. just for something a little bit off piece. You know, I think at the moment, you know, how difficult it is to sort of fix the state, resolve the state, and for someone to have, you know, within you know, maybe our parents' sort of, you know, lifetimes, you know, been able to sort of you know, build an entire new country, and not just any country, but you know, a country that is you know, an exemplar in innovation, in state capacity, is like, you know, is a sort of example for us to all look for. So
It would
I've kind
almost
of
be
put
a
the
disservice to say that they punch above their weight, like they are within the weight class.
yeah, exactly, yeah, pound for pound, top of boxer rec, for sure, and on nation states, you know, or you'd at least put them up there for sure. And then finally, I guess the ones that I was slightly, so again, so not to mention Matt Clifford again, but
I was waiting for it.
but Matt has this thing where he says that founders today, you know, or today's founders, if they were born 500 years ago, they'd be like, you know, conquerors of nations and things. And so I'm not going to say like Nelson or someone, you know, Genghis Khan or someone like that, but there's probably, you know, shout for them. The last one I'll say, because sorry, no, I'm kind of going over time, but I was up, so I live in, my family's from the northeast of England, and we were up at this place called Cragside recently, which is like this like lovely sort of country home in this amazing sort of forest and wilderness, and it was built by a guy called William Armstrong, and it was the first place that ever had electricity in around the world.
Wow.
In a home. And this was, Armstrong was basically a sort of weapons developer, but he would sort of have all these innovations in the home, almost as like a showroom to potential clients to say, hey, here's this thing, this, you know, you can read at night by sort of magical light rather than by candle. And then, you know, obviously then the moment he goes, oh, I have a new idea, I have a new product, they, you know, they you know, they go head over heels, although it's probably for like very lethal Gatling guns and whatever else, but I'll put William Armstrong as a sort of ode to the Northeast, and yeah, real sort of try before you buy energy.
I love it, Tom. This has been an absolute pleasure. Before we let you go, just the last question. I would like to have Matt on at some point. What is the single question that I have to ask him?
I would say that stuff. I'll text you. I'll text you something afterwards. I guess the immediate question to me that I would have, that is like a fair question, because yeah, I know there are many questions you could ask Matt at the moment. I would ask him, you know, I mean, if he were to go back, he's been so successful, right? Like if you were to go back to, you know, age 21, like just leaving uni, like knowing what you know now about AI, like what would you have done differently? I guess that would be something I'd be curious to know.
You got it. My leadership will be done. Tom, this has been a pleasure. I'm going to book in time soon, and we're going to go all out on Fractile.
Yeah, fantastic. We'd love to do that.
Phenomenal, my friend. This has been a pleasure. I'll speak to you soon.
Yeah, I've loved it. Have a lovely day.
You too as well.